Okay, so today we'll go over section 3.6 and the exercises. This is the section on analytic and synthetic statements, different kinds of claims. So this will continue our examination of various patterns and language constructs. Again, if you understand how language constructs work, this can be a great benefit to you and make you more aware of what's going on in discussions, debates, and arguments. One of the most famous discussions of language constructs occurs in the dystopian book 1984 by George Orwell, where it suggested that if manipulative people try to control your language constructs, this can be a facet of totalitarianism. And it is what is actually done by some of the more extremist groups when they have power. All right, so let's see, we've got, there we go. So today is session number 354, 659. That's 354, 659. Okay, so let's start by talking about the distinction between analytic claims and synthetic claims. These are two types of claims, and the distinction is about what, if anything, makes the claim true. And it will turn out that what makes analytic statements true is the way terms are used or defined, whereas what will make synthetic statements true will be something else, something empirical about the world. So an analytic statement is if there's sort of two ways of discussing this. One is if the subject of the statement contains the predicate. So again, we've talked about definitions like claiming a bachelor is an unmarried man. A statement is analytic if the definition of the word entails the truth of the claim. So, but if you understand the definition of the word, what's sort of interesting or annoying about analytic statements is they don't actually teach you anything new. So if you say bachelor, and if you know what the word means, and then you say, hey, I've noticed something about bachelors. They're all unmarried men. Well, that's not really an interesting or profound statement. It just means that you understand the way that the term was defined. And you don't need the full definition in an analytic statement for it to be an analytic statement. So saying a bachelor is a man is an analytic statement. Much in the same way that saying a quarterback is a football player. That is an analytic statement. If you understand what the terms refer to, you're not really adding anything new to the term. You're not expanding knowledge about the term. You don't have to do any sort of like scientific study to figure out whether or not the term is true. What determines whether or not the term is true is the fact that you look it up in a dictionary. So analytic statements are sometimes referred to as true by definition. Now, there is a more subtle and complex way of thinking about analytic statements. So, saying that it's true by definition or that the subject includes the predicate is one way of thinking about it. But a more expansive way, the way we're going to use it in this class, is a statement is analytic if denying the statement is self-contradictory. So saying something like, all frogs are frogs, again, it's not a very interesting statement, but it's an analytic statement, and if you deny it, you get an absurdity. The absurdity is that you would have to find all frogs are not frogs, or that some frogs are not frogs. Math, basic truths of math are also analytically true on this account. Because 2 plus 2 equals 4, if you try denying the claim, you will have the absurd claim that 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. So again, these are analytic statements, and denying them is self-contradictory. All right, synthetic statements. So far, we've talked about analytic statements today. In the past, we've talked about self-contradictory statements, statements that are necessarily false, statements that, again, if you understand the truth of the words, the statement can't possibly be true. Some triangles are squares. That can't possibly be true if you understand the definitions of the words. That's saying that some figures with 3 angles have 4 angles. That can't possibly be true. And you don't have to do like an empirical study. You don't have to look out at the world. You just have to understand the definitions being used. So what analytic and self-contradictory statements have in common is that they're all completely about the way words are used. In neither case do you need to do a lab experiment or examine something about the world to know whether or not the statement is true or false. You only have to understand how words are being used. So a third kind of statement now is what is called a synthetic statement. A synthetic statement is neither analytic, it's not sort of self-evidently true in light of the definitions of the words, but it's also not self-contradictory. It's not self-evidently false based on the way the words are used. So a synthetic statement, frankly, most interesting statements are synthetic statements. Those are the ones worth examining and debating and investigating. Because a synthetic statement makes a coherent claim that goes beyond the definition of the subject. So the claim is coherent, it's not self-contradictory, but it's also not analytic. It goes beyond the definitions of a subject. So synthetic claims can be either true or false. If they are going to be proven or verified, they have to be empirically verified, although some may be unverifiable even if they're true. But what makes them synthetic statements, again, is whatever would make them true would not be something about the way the concepts themselves are used. It would be something about reality itself. So here are a bunch of synthetic statements. There's more than one person in the room. Synthetic and true. At least true for now. Later, when we all leave, the room will be empty and the statement will no longer be true. Silverman likes chocolate ice cream. Very true. The movie Blade Runner is 117 minutes long. I'm pretty sure that's true for one of the versions. There's like 9 versions of that movie. Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths. I think that's true. Or at least true according to Buddhist tradition. So again, these are not true by definition. There's nothing in the definition of the Tribble Auditorium that means room that always has more than one person in it. There's nothing about the word Silverman that means guy who likes chocolate ice cream. These are all synthetic contingent truths. They could have been otherwise. They could have made Blade Runner 118 minutes long and not 117 minutes long. Okay, so those are all probably true synthetic statements. But here are more synthetic statements, and these synthetic statements are false. The New York Giants won the Super Bowl last year. Funny, I've been using this slide a long time, and that's always been false. Our solar system has 20 planets. Yeah, that's false. Some synthetic statements are unverifiable. They're not analytic, they're not self-contradictory, but they're debatable. But what we're interested in today is that they are synthetic. They go beyond the meanings of the words. So the Statue of Liberty is the most beautiful statue in the world? Maybe. Ross Perot would make a better president than Michael Jordan? Plausible. Professor Underwood is more intelligent than anyone living in Alpha Centauri. Very plausible. But again, the point here is a synthetic claim can be sort of true and kind of obvious. It can be false, and it's false that can be obvious. Or it can be the sort of thing that might be true, might be false, and we just don't know. It's unverifiable. All right, let me pause. Synthetic, analytic, self-contradictory statements. Questions, thoughts, observations? How are we doing on this? Yes, sir.
So generally, the more opinionated ones
unverifiable. Yeah, I mean, opinions are tend to be the sort of things that are just unverifiable. I think that's almost what we mean by that word. Whereas facts are empirically verifiable, but they both can be synthetic. So both what you think of as a fact or think of as an opinion can be synthetic. Was that your question as well? Was there another question? All right, well, as with most of our topics, I think the best thing we can spend our time doing is practice and examples. So let's get our devices out. All triangles have 3 angles. True, or rather analytic or synthetic? Good, that's very promising. Yeah, this is where it's saying all triangles have 3 angles. If you know what a triangle is, this is something we learned in kindergarten, right? Triangle has 3 sides, 3 angles. In fact, if you look at the word itself, tri, the prefix tri means what? 3. So it says shapes that are 3 angles have 3 angles. And you can see if you were to deny this, you would claim that a triangle doesn't have 3 angles. This would be sort of an absurdity based on what the word means, based on how we use the word. So very, very good. All right, how about 2 + 2 = 4? Good. Yes, the way we are using the word analytic is that the truths of math like this are analytic. So because if we deny this claim, we get the sort of obvious self-contradictory absurdity that 2 + 2 does not equal 4. I will offer this proviso for philosophy majors. This is actually, there are actually debates about this, but the way we're going to use these terms in class are such that the truths of math are analytic rather than synthetic. With apologies to Immanuel Kant. All right, combining 2 drops of mercury with 2 other drops results in 1 big drop. Good. Yes. So this is something that's true. This is something that's very obviously true and intuitive, but it's synthetic because of what makes it true. That's what makes it synthetic rather than analytic. It's because to find this out, you have to go to the lab and you have to try it and verify it. You don't just have to understand the meanings of words. And if you didn't know how chemistry works, you might think, hey, maybe some weird things happen with certain substances, and that they don't get bigger the way you would expect. And there are some counterintuitive things that happen with, say, freezing points and boiling points and such. But what's important here is that this is true synthetically because of something about the way the world works, and not something about the words drops of mercury. Ooh, there are ants that have a system of slavery. Good. That's synthetic. That is synthetic, and I think false. What makes it synthetic is how we investigate the truth of this. The way we investigate the truth of this is we go out, we observe ant behavior, and then we classify whether or not it fits under our definition of slavery or not. So yes. But it's not true in light of there's nothing about ants that means, eight-legged creature that has a system of slavery. Either some ants are parasitic or else none are. Analytic or synthetic. All right. The correct answer is analytic. And there's a reason why most of you got it wrong. You probably got it wrong because you thought about the words parasitic and ants too much. Any sentence with this pattern is analytically true because of what the words either some are or else none are mean. Because this statement will always be true no matter what noun you put in after the either some are and what trait you put in next. So if the sentence is either some professors are 7 feet tall or else none are, the statement will still be true. Because what the statement really says, either there is at least one member of the group with this trait, or there are 0 members of the group with this trait. And by definition, the way those concepts work, it will always be a true statement. So this is analytically true, not because of anything about ants and parasitics, but because of the logic of the words, either some have the trait or none have the trait. So that one was a little more subtle. Don't feel too bad if you got it wrong. But again, underline it, put a star next to it, and circle the other words, the either some or else none are pattern. All right, no 3-year-old, implicitly no 3-year-old human, no 3-year-old understands symbolic logic. Yeah, now this is synthetic, and what makes it synthetic is what makes it true would be something about the world. There's nothing about a human that is defined as creature that cannot understand logic until after age 3. In fact, there probably is some prodigy out there, some child to logic professors that they've abused by trying to teach them logic from, the moment they can communicate. There probably is some 3-year-old that understands the very basics of symbolic logic. But even if it's false, it's not false because of what the words mean. Symbolic logic doesn't mean thing that no one below the age of 4 can understand, and 3-year-old human doesn't mean can't understand symbolic logic. If it's true, it's an empirical and contingent truth. It's something that happens to be true, not something things are true in light of the definitions of the words. Does that make sense? All right. No 3-year-old human is an adult. Good. Yeah, I mean, certainly if there's a couple different ways to use the word adult. So if we're using the word adult in this way, no 3-year-old is a legal adult in the United States, then it's definitely an analytic claim because, those are truths that are defined. Those are claims that are defined by definitions in legal code, and so forth. So, good. Water boils at 90 degrees centigrade on that 10,000 foot mountain. Good, yes, that's synthetic. As you probably know, there is something strange about boiling points. There's a relationship between boiling points and air pressure, and the higher you go or lower you go, it changes the boiling points. And that's something that can only be known by empirical observation. Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade at sea level. Yeah, so did you ever think it was a remarkable coincidence that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade and freezes at 0? Why is that? Good. It's because that's the way we defined it. We said whatever the freezing point will be, that will be our 0, and whatever the boiling point will be 100. So since the system is based on the boiling point under normal atmospheric conditions at sea level, this becomes an analytic truth based on the definitions that we use. Now, if you got this one wrong because you didn't know that story about the freezing and boiling point of water, don't worry about it, but jot it down somewhere so that you get it right if I ask it on the test. And kudos to you if you got this one right. No uncle who has never married is an only child. All right, now this, surprise, surprise, this is an analytic claim. You don't need to look at it that the statement is true, and you don't need to look out at the world to decide that this statement is true. You just have to trace the concepts of the way the word uncle works. So there are 2 ways to be an uncle. All right, you have to be a man, and you either need to be married and have your spouse have a sibling that has kids, so that these kids down here will be your niece or nephew. Or, so if you're married, you can be an uncle because your spouse's siblings have kids. Or So that you either need to have your spouse's siblings have kids, or you have to have siblings that have kids. So if you're an only child, you need to have a niece or nephew through marriage. So again, you don't need to do a statistical survey. You don't need to examine the world. You just need to understand how the concept uncle works. And I understand how uncle works. I don't understand how cousin works, or especially second and third cousins. But all that to say, this is an analytic truth based on the way we use the words uncle and marriage and niece and nephew. And again, if you got that wrong, don't feel too bad about it, but just write down, some sort of note that you need to have been able to trace this conceptually and abstractly. All swans are white. All right, now this one is a little bit hard because there are sort of levels of dictionaries, and sort of mediocre dictionaries will describe a swan as a white bird. But here's how we know that this is a synthetic term. Is the claim true? Have you ever heard of a black swan? There's like whole movies about black swan. So yeah, there are anomalies called black swans. So the statement is false, and if the statement is false, then it can't be true by definition. So what makes something a swan on most scientific accounts is like number of genes and certain patterns, certain genetic patterns. Not whether or not it's white. Most are white, but not all are white. So I won't ask. I'll try to avoid asking a hard one like this. But yeah, this one is a synthetic claim, and it's a false claim. So all analytic claims have to be true. Every material body is spatially located. Good. Yeah, this one again is a little bit tricky, but traditionally, going all the way back to the time of Aristotle, materiality is defined in terms of extension into space and having spatial features of being measurable spatially, being extended in space. The contrast class are things that have no spatial dimensions, things like ideas, or if you're a Platonist, things like the forms, or if you're religious, things like angels and gods and things like that. Things that are material by definition, are defined as material in terms of their extension into space. Again, if you didn't know the history of those terms, that's okay, but now you know. Every material body has weight. Unfortunately, this is a synthetic claim, and here's why. I already told you how we define materiality. Materiality is defined in terms of having spatial dimensions. And that's it. So it is not defined historically in terms of having weight. And in fact, we're not sure that all material things have weight. If you take a material thing and put it in vacuum, would it have weight? Theoretically, no. If there's such a thing as vacuum, I'm not sure if there is such a thing as real absolute vacuum. Again, Obviously, you didn't know that about the history of the terms, but now you do. And Gensler intentionally chose these examples so that you would have these somewhat unintuitive contrasts. You know, it's a little weird that the boiling point of water on a mountain is a synthetic claim, but the boiling point of water at sea level is an analytic claim. It is a little weird that materiality is defined in terms of size, spatial dimensions, but not in terms of weight. But now you know. The sum of the angles of a Euclidean triangle are 180 degrees. Good. Yes, the way we're using the word analytic, mathematical truths will always be analytic truths. Yes. Yes. So what do you have in mind? Yeah, no, we should, you know, given that we had a whole class on equivocation using the definition the same way, it would be important for me to stick with the accepted definition. So I will do my best to not throw you a curveball by changing the definition on you. That wouldn't be nice. All right. If all Parisians are French and all French are European, then all Parisians are European. Good. Yes, this is analytically true. Now, there's something, though, there's a nuance here that I want you to catch. Anything with this pattern would be analytically true, even if we switched up the cities in a way that does not reflect reality. So let's say we switch this a little bit. If we said, if all Parisians are Americans and all Americans are Asians, then all Parisians are Asians. That also would be true and analytically true. And the reason that would be true is not because of anything about Parisians, Europeans, Asians, or Americans. It would be true because of the pattern of the meanings of the words if all are and all, anything with the pattern if all A is B and all B is C, then all A is C. Anything with that pattern is true because of the hypothetical word if. So here, let me do something else. If all philosophers are Martians and all Martians have 3 heads, then all philosophers have 3 heads. That statement is actually true. And it's analytically true. Not because of anything about philosophers, Martians, and numbers of heads. It's true because of the pattern, the meanings of the words, if all A is B and all B is C, then all A is C. Anything with that pattern is true and analytically true because it has what is called a hypothetical tone. The use of the word if is what makes it hypothetical. So we could do this with football. If the Jets had Tom Brady and Tom Brady always wins, then the Jets would always win. I mean, unfortunately for the Jets, they don't have Tom Brady. Every event has a cause. Good. Yeah, this is a synthetic claim, and we don't know whether or not it's true. Anyone take? Do I have any science majors here who know what we might think might not have a cause? What might not have a cause? No, that's not so much what we're worried about. It's actually quantum mechanics, the motions of electrons and such on the subatomic level. We don't know what causes them, what causes the motions in different ways. And some thinkers think there is no cause. Other people think, well, there's obviously a cause. We just haven't figured it out yet. So again, you get to philosophical debates at the bottom of science. But all that to say, events, an electron going clockwise instead of counterclockwise around an atom. The claim that every event has a cause is a synthetic claim. Might be true, might be false, we're really not sure. So the claim is synthetic. Every effect has a cause. Good. Yes, this is true, and it's analytically true because the words cause and effect are defined in light of each other. In fact, our contemporary English words cause and effect, I'm pretty sure, go back to the Greek concept of efficient causation, where we get our root words for cause and effect. So those words are defined in light of each other. Therefore, anything that is an effect has to have a cause. In contrast, if something is an event, by use of that concept, we don't know whether or not it has a cause. I mean, I'm on the side of thinking all events have causes. So I think it's true, but I know that's something that can be debated. We ought to treat persons not only as a means, but always also as an end in themselves. If you've taken a low-level ethics class, you will have heard this claim. Is this claim analytic or synthetic? Good. Yeah, this is a synthetic claim. What's tricky about this synthetic claim is it's hard to know what the truth maker would be. But that we don't define humans as that which is an end in themselves. It might be true. And this ties into very common sense ethical claims like you shouldn't use people. If you want to know why, take my ethics class. One ought to be logically consistent. Good, yeah. Oughts on their own are always going to be synthetic unless you try to add something to make it contradictory. I mean, maybe one ought to be logically consistent if you want to have a coherent worldview. Maybe if you add the if, that if clause, then it would become an analytic statement. But in general, oughts are synthetic, not analytic. God exists. Well, I won't ask you this one on the test because there are actually high-level debates in Phil religion as to whether or not this claim is synthetic or analytic. There is a school of thought going back to the medieval thinker Anselm of Canterbury that claims that the existence of God is an analytic truth that anyone who understands what the idea refers to would have to realize that God is the sort of thing that must exist. Since the sun has risen on every day we have observed it, it is reasonable to believe it will rise tomorrow. Yeah, this is analytic, depending on our use of reasonableness. If if we define reasonableness as sort of something in reference to empirical evidence, then that would be analytically true. Unless we have strong reasons to the contrary, we ought to believe what sense experience seems to reveal. Yeah, this looks synthetic again because of the use of the word ought, and it doesn't seem to be tied to something that's a direct, obvious contradiction. Yeah, the idea of ought doesn't seem to be defined in terms of believing sense experience. Yeah, we're getting into some weird ones here. I'm not going to ask you anything this esoteric on the exam. Everything red is colored. Good. Yes, it's analytic because the word red means something that has the trait of being the color red. So if something is red, it has a color. So it is analytically true that everything red is colored. Nothing red is blue at the same time in the same respect. Strangely, again, this is Gensler trying to draw a contrast. Everything red is colored because red is defined as a color is analytically true. Red is not defined as not being blue. So therefore, this is actually synthetic. You're correct that this is sort of an obvious way about how the world works, but neither red nor blue is defined in terms of excluding one another. In fact, I think we could probably even argue that things that are black actually possess redness and blueness at the same time. They're just sort of overwhelmed and hidden in the blackness of the trait. All right, I think we've gotten into enough difficult esoteric ones. I think we can just call it a day. Look, for next time, do the next reading on the schedule. Next week, we will do something a little bit more fun. The informal fallacies. We'll look at some commercials. We'll see how many patterns in illegitimate sales tactics and such. And we'll move on. So stay healthy, stay warm, keep up the good work, and there'll be exam in the not too distant future. Yes, ma'am. I was told I would get a record from the department on everyone who logged in. If they don't give me that by next week, I'll let you know and we'll figure something out. But I should be able to get that. Thank you all very much.